It's no secret that if you're going to be successful in real estate investing, you have to be able to fund your deals. Whether you're doing the Burr method or whether you're fixing and flipping properties for a profit, you got to be able to get to the closing table with money, and you got to have money to rehab the property. And so I personally use Backflip Capital when I need money to get to the closing table and to rehab my properties. I'm in the middle of a flip right now, and I partner with Backflip. It has been the smoothest process of all time. I literally went on their app, applied for the loan. You get pre-approved in less than 48 hours. You can lock in funding in just a few seconds with the touch of a button. Funding takes less than 2 weeks. Hello, that gives you an advantage when you're making offers on properties. And I can't say enough about partnering with Backflip Capital. They're great folks with a fantastic product that everybody listening to this should check out for the next time you go to do a Burr deal or fix and flip property. So here's what I want you to do. Go down to the show notes of this show. I've put a link for Backflip Capital in those notes. All you have to do is click the link so that you can download their app and get your next deal funded with Backflip. All right, so I'm here with my guy, Connor Cushman. Connor, what's up, bro?
What's up, Jaron? Good to be with you, man.
Good to be with you, dude. I am so excited to have Connor on the podcast because I haven't got to meet a lot of people in person that I've talked to on Instagram, but we met at FinCon. I think it was last year, right?
That's right. Yeah, we were down in Orlando, and we ended up getting a couple meals together, and we had a good time. That was probably the highlight for me, was getting to hang with you. And I think we had gone back and forth over DMs quite a bit. Maybe jumped on a call or two before then. But that was great, man. Good times.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool to actually meet people in person. I've actually been working with Connor recently on trying to find a short-term rental, which we'll jump into. He's an agent in a couple states here in the Southeast, and just a gem of a guy, just a good guy who just does the right thing and knows the real estate game, knows the Airbnb game, he does it the right way and takes care of his clients too. So I'm excited to dig into it. So we'll get all into the real estate stuff, obviously, but there's a lot of people who listen to this podcast. I always like to give them like a glimpse of like, who's the person we're talking to. So real estate aside, who is Connor Cushman in like a 1 minute snapshot?
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. And I want to say too, I think one of the coolest things about social media and Instagram, and I dabble on social media, and that's how you and I met. That's what's really cool is the real friendships and relationships that can be built on social media. So definitely encourage people to jump in and just interact with people in the DMs and stuff, and cool things come from it. But a little about me: I live in the North Metro Atlanta area. I work across North Georgia as an investor. I spend a lot of my time in North Georgia, Tennessee, the Smoky Mountains, and then the Florida Panhandle. And then as a real estate agent, I roll in North Georgia, North Metro Atlanta, and then the Florida Panhandle. And I've got two little crazy kids, a 3.5-year-old, a 9-month-old little girl, and my wife. And we really enjoy spending time together. And a lot of what drives me as a person is to create opportunities for my family to just achieve our full potential as a family and as individuals, and help other families do the same. So that's, I try to show up that way in the way that I work, in the way that we show up as friends, as church members, and yeah, we're having fun. We're experiencing a lot of fun stuff as real estate investors, and growing our portfolio and working hard.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's cool to see you have all the success you've had. We talked to a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds. Connor has been doing all this. He started while working a full-time like W-2 job in the tech world. He's raising a family. His wife's working. And where a lot of people say, I just don't have the time to buy real estate. Maybe next year, right? It's like Corey Smith. You know who Corey Smith is? If you're from my area, you know who Corey Smith is. He has a song, you guys can look it up. He needs to give me some royalties for this or something. Maybe next year, right? And that's so many people when it comes to real estate. You can get busy, aka you don't make it a priority. But I think what's cool about your story, and it resonates with mine, is you have a dream life that you want to create, not only for yourself, but for your family. And then what I thought was cool, what you just said, is also for other people. What a lot of people don't realize is when you create that dream life for yourself and you start putting yourself in a good financial position and you start giving yourself freedom, it really opens up the opportunity for you to be able to do the same for others because you've been through a lot, so you can guide people. And then you just have more time because you've created this freedom through the choices you have made. So what was that journey like for you? Like, when did the light bulb hit? So you're obviously, you got your family going, you're working a regular job. And then all of a sudden now you have 5 short-term rentals and 2 long-term rentals. So walk us through that aha moment where you're like, all right, real estate's for me. And then what was that first deal you did?
That's right. Yeah. And to your point, the W-2 path is the path that most people are walking right now. Probably most people that are listening, and the path that most people will take. And like you, I'm not anti W-2. Even though I left last year, I think there's a huge majority of people that are going to be more comfortable in a W-2 environment. And there's so many good things about being able to turn it on at 9 and turn it off at 5 and have your health insurance covered. And there's plenty of situations where health insurance is a huge deal for people, things like that. So for me, I actually started my career in what was kind of my dream career at the time. I was studying in a pretty competitive marketing program out west, and leaving school, I got a competitive internship at LinkedIn, big software company owned by Microsoft. And I went out to New York City as an intern, which is a total hack, by the way. If you're in college, get those cool internships in these cool cities. I was working in the Empire State Building. They put us up in this sweet corporate housing across the street from the Empire State Building, just like total dream summer. Go back to school for my senior year, and then have the full-time offer to convert back to a full-time entry-level program at LinkedIn. And that's what took us out to the San Francisco area. So I was in the Bay Area. We move out to the Bay Area in October. I start my job, and 2 weeks later, I have my little boy. This is back in 2019. And every morning I'm getting up while it's still dark, and we're living in the East Bay, which, if you know the Bay Area, if you have a family and you're on a starter salary living in the Bay Area, you're kind of screwed. And so I'm living in the East Bay, just so I can afford to kind of like start to build my life as I got this baby coming. So I have to commute about an hour and a half to work. So I get up, it's dark, my kid's still asleep. I get out, I walk to the train station, I ride the train, I go to work all day. It's usually long days. And then I get back just before little one's going to bed. And I'm standing on the train, I'm listening to Bigger Pockets podcasts, I'm doing all these things. And in the back of my head, I'm like, there's no way this is a long-term plan for me. And as much as I loved the work I was doing, as well as my employer was taking care of me and creating opportunities for me, and as impressive as the people were around me that I was working with, I was like, this is not my path long term. So when my wife and I would have moments where we would sit down, I remember we would kind of sit down and say, all right, we're going to each take 5-10 minutes and write down, like, what are the specific attributes of like our ideal day? And it would be things as specific as like what time we woke up, how often are we eating breakfast together, how much time are we spending outside, where are we, what kind of house do we have, how much of the year do we spend at the beach versus at our house, all these little kind of specific things, like how many hours a day are we working? Because the reality is, it's like we all want meaningful work. None of us really wants to sit at the beach all day. And so going through those exercises and then coming back to work on Monday and not seeing my family all day, created this, like, not so much created, but just reinforced this pull I had towards something different, something better, a life where I was kind of in control of my time and had the freedom to create and build businesses and build wealth and for myself and others.
I think I'm gonna stop you right there. I think that's amazing, because that's an exercise I do. And I do it, I've had those big moments like you're talking about, where it's like, okay, something's got to change. And then even when things are good, I've gone back to the drawing board, and I call it working backwards.
Yep.
It's literally creating your dream life. And I have a whiteboard sitting right here to my left, and I will write down, what do I want my days to look like? What do I
Yep.
want my weeks to look like? What do I want my months to look like? And then I will look at my life and I will create a plan of what I have to do to get there. And you guys will be amazed at what you're able to accomplish when you do that. And I think, this isn't a goal setting call, so we won't spend a lot of time on this, but getting it written down is step number one, and then putting timelines on it. And then once you put those timelines on it, just put actionable items that are going to get you there. And man, you'll look back in 2, 3, 4 years and be like, dang, like that worked.
Yeah, man. It's funny, and we can move on from this, but I was just going through my Google Drive folder. You probably have a bunch of Google Drive folders like me. And I was working through some stuff, and I saw a document called Realistic Plan for Quitting My Job. And it was this timeline over the course of like 5 years with specific objectives and timelines and plans and goals. And it's amazing when you write stuff down. You don't even have to some of these guys say you got to write it down, write the same thing down every morning and repeat it back to yourself and say it out loud and look in the mirror. I've never even been that good at like keeping those sort of routines, but just the exercise of like writing it down and maybe revisiting it every month or 3 or 6 and just checking in and then running full speed at those objectives is super powerful. And it was amazing to see how much of that stuff had actually happened as I've gone throughout the last few years. Pretty cool.
That's amazing. It works, folks. I encourage all of you listening to this episode, do that today. As soon as you stop listening to this, as soon as this episode's over, go do it, because it'll give you a leg up. So you're in the Bay Area. You guys decide, all right, this is what we want our life to look like. What's next?
Yeah, so 2020 hits, and so this doesn't sound like that long ago. But the plan was always to get back to where. So I'm back now in North Georgia where I grew up. The plan was eventually to invest in real estate. So backing up a little bit, before we got to the Bay Area, I had started selling real estate in Utah. I had been listening to Bigger Pockets, getting my real estate MBA is what I like to call it. Listening to all the podcasts, reading all the books. Was fortunate to have read Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was like 12 years old, and so that had started this kind of momentum of reading and learning about real estate, but hadn't acted on it. So the plan was eventually to start investing in real estate. 2020 hits, we go remote, we immediately act and move to Georgia, and we say we're going to buy a house as soon as we can and start to do. I heard someone call it, I want to say like rental waking, where you kind of leave a wake of rental properties behind you as you move into one. You rent it out and move on to the next one, and you leave a wake of rental properties behind you. I thought that was a cool term that kind of has stuck with me.
Love it. Never heard of it.
So that was the plan. We did that with our first house. And we maybe we can dive into that first property since we're there. It was interesting because it was the fall of 2020, and if you go back to that time, many people were shouting from the rooftops that real estate was about to crash. Reminds me of a time that we're all familiar with right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, so people are saying it's still a scary time. I remember being someone who knew real estate really well, had studied it, had sold it, but still feeling the nerves and the anxiety of buying that first property. It's super scary and it's overwhelming. And you don't know what you don't know, and you feel like you have these blind spots that you're going to miss. And but I found this property in a pretty good area for $205,000, which sounds bananas now. But this is in a good area in the North Atlanta suburbs. And I plug that property into Rentometer, which is hopefully a tool people are familiar with, but it's a great tool for plugging it. You plug in an address, you put the bed bath count, and then it spits out kind of a median rental projection. And I remember feeling like, am I really going to like take this big bet on this one tool? But it turns out Rentometer is a really good tool.
Most property managers use Rentometer.
Yeah, it's legit. It's legit. I did some cross-referencing with like available listings on Facebook and Zillow just to gut check. Kind of had a sense for, okay, I'm buying this for $200. This is probably renting for $1,500, $1,600. And based on all the other expenses, taxes, insurance, and CapEx, and knowing that it was a property that was in pretty good shape, we rolled with it. And the plan was live in it for a little while and then rent it out as soon as we left. And of course, that deal that felt really scary at the time we kind of did some updating while we were in there, and moved on, and that has since become just a home run. Like the payment has gotten cheaper over time as we've dropped PMI. The property has appreciated 60%.
Mm.
The rents have appreciated. We're now renting that for 18 to 1900, and it's just a great property. And I look back and think, man, I'm so glad I just like started that timer, got the ball rolling, got the experience, and have built on from that, obviously. But a great first experience.
That is awesome. So this was a long-term rental, correct? This was not an Airbnb.
Correct. Yeah. So we've got tenants in there. We've had that for a couple of years, and now we're currently living in the second version of that, and looking to move on to our next primary home
To do the same
sometime
thing.
this year. Yep.
Wow. You mentioned, rents have continued to climb. You probably saw this stat. Like somebody posted a graph of this the other day. Rents, I think it's over the last 50 years, have never gone down. Like for long-term rentals, there's never been a year to where the average rents in the U.S. have gone down. Like that is absolutely wild.
Yeah.
Absolutely wild. And then another crazy stat I looked up today because I was using this data for something else. There is a 95% occupancy rate in rental properties in the U.S. So rents continue to go up, right? Occupancy rate is in the 95%. So your chances are pretty darn good. And we know that over time, real estate appreciates over the long run. What are you waiting on? What are you waiting on? You just said it was going up 60% in 3 years, 60% in its value. That's unbelievable, dude. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And I mean, hopefully for all of us, probably, right? Like it stabilizes back to an average of, 3 to 10% of annual appreciation, right? Like none of us really want like that crazy appreciation that we saw. I'm not betting against it, honestly, but even at that, like as rents are appreciating and the home property values are appreciating, and you're experiencing the tax benefits and the cash flow, it's just like, man, this is like, it just gets better and better over time. It's scary at first. It's probably the worst it's ever going to be at first, and then it just gets better over time. It's beautiful.
I love that. I'd say this saying a lot, but I got to the place where I truly believe that not investing in real estate is riskier for my future than investing in real estate. And so many people get paralyzed by the fear of what if. They think of worst case scenarios. In most worst case scenarios, there's something to mitigate that risk anyways. But people, unless they have somebody or something in their ear that is kind of replacing that fear with logic, so many people get held up. It's like, no, you got to look logically. Logically, rents go up. Logically, occupancy stays up. Logically, properties go up over time. Logically, if you get good debt on a property, you're secure. You're not going out doing 60-day high interest, they can call my note type of loans. And if you stay away from the dumb things, do the right things that people who know what they're doing teach, such as you and myself, you're giving yourself a pretty darn good chance to win in the long run.
That's right. I recently heard someone kind of use this example of this spectrum. And if on the one end, you've got like the total genius, just super high IQ, brilliant mind. And then on the other hand, on the other end of the spectrum, you've got like an idiot, just a total dummy. And I see this with like my clients. Most of the time, I'm not working with total dummies or rocket scientists, but somewhere on that spectrum, right? The people on the genius side of the spectrum tend to have the problem of overanalyzing to the point that they don't act and they don't move forward. And I've seen that happen plenty of times where these brilliant minds miss out on great opportunities because they overanalyze. And then on the flip side, you've got the idiot that if you pay them $5, they'll jump off the cliff, right? Oh. And there's a certain point where that's just reckless and dangerous. And so really probably the most successful real estate investors live somewhere in the middle of that spectrum where they've got that ability to analyze but not overanalyze. And the dumb idiot side of the spectrum, for lack of a better term, the willingness to kind of take that leap and jump. And fortunately, I'm just an average guy, and I think that's why a lot of us real estate investors are just average people, very relatable people with relatively normal stories that have chosen to take action and jump. And made those choices consistently over time.
Mm.
And that's really the only difference. And I think that's what's so cool about real estate is like, you really don't have to be a genius. You just have to like take those steps along the path consistently. And you have to be wise and thoughtful and find good people that you can trust, but it's not rocket science.
Dude, that is spot on. I always say, do you know how much experience all of us had when we first started? Zero. You can go find the biggest name, Grant Cardone, anybody from Bigger Pockets you love, Robert Kiyosaki, everybody started at zero. At one point had zero properties, and they feel the same way that a lot of you feel right now. I'm scared. I don't know what's on the other side. So you're not in a new place. You're in a new place for you, but all of us have felt it. Connor telling you right now, he felt it. It's scary. We've been there. Like when you hadn't done it, it's scary. But for once in our lives, the grass is actually greener, on the other side of buying that first property, or the other side of scaling from 1 or 2 properties to 5, 6, 7, 8 properties. It really, really is greener. One thing, and I don't want to dive too far into this, but one thing that's a pet peeve of mine is people missing out on deals over petty stuff. I've seen people lose deals, over $5,000 in negotiation. They wanted to get the property for $115 and the seller wanted $120, or it only cash flows $200 and they had a minimum of $250. Don't do that. Don't do that, because if let's say Connor does that on this first property he buys it for $200, it's renting for $16. I would imagine you weren't absolutely crushing it in cash flow. Maybe I'm wrong, but it was probably like just a okay cash flow, maybe close to break even. Who cares? Who cares? Because now that property is worth 60% more than when you had it, while tenants have been paying down the debt. You've been getting tax benefits. You had a job. You still work as a realtor. Your wife has a job. So you have that security blanket in. And even if, and I don't advocate for this, so y'all don't take words out of my mouth, but I have bought properties when I first started. I was like, oh, this is how naive I was. I was like, oh, even if this doesn't cash flow and I have to pay $100 a month, $200 a month, I don't care. I have a job. Would I rather spend that $100 on going to Chick-fil-A 4 times that month, or would I rather pay $100 a month to own this piece of real estate where somebody else is paying the majority of it? Let's say, $900 total a month. They're paying $800. I'm paying $100 in, and now it's going to be worth these hundreds of thousands of dollars later. I don't know. It just drives me crazy when people like set these strict parameters of like, I'll only buy for this type of deal. I'm like, okay, well, send them my way, because I'll gobble them up and be a lot wealthier in 5 years. I don't know. I don't know what you're taking.
I hear you. And I run into this a lot too with short-term rental investors, right? Short-term rentals has gotten so much attention recently. And so I work with a lot of first-time investors where it's that stuff that you're talking about, where we're losing deals over, something that moves the mortgage payment by $25 a month, and suddenly that kills the deal, right? And I'm all for kind of, setting your parameters and respecting those and that sort of thing. But to your point about kind of having this unattainable threshold for investment, goes back to kind of like, where are you on that spectrum of genius? And are you trying to get the deal that only, Grant Cardone or Jaron's going to have come across his desk because he's been in the business for 20 years and he's got brokers that have him on speed dial? I don't know if that's a term I can use without dating myself too much. But you have to be realistic too about like who you are, the experience level you have, and to come in and expect a 50% cash on cash return on your first investment, when you don't have any relationships with wholesalers or agents, or have any sort of unique ability to find something on the market other than what you see on Zillow. It's just unrealistic, and will potentially keep you from never getting the timer going, getting in the game, right? So
when I set out on my real estate journey 5 years ago, I wasn't exactly sure what the outcome was going to be, but I knew based on history that people who had bought this asset and held it over time, it had completely changed their lives. It had given them life-changing wealth. It had given them time freedom, and it had given them financial freedom. And I knew that I wanted that for myself and my family. Fast forward from 2018 to today, And it has completely changed our lives. It has completely changed my family tree because I said yes. I took that step forward into buying this asset that has proven itself time and time again for centuries. And so if you're still on the sidelines and you have yet to start buying real estate, or maybe you have a few properties, but you've ran into roadblocks and you haven't been able to scale and add the volume you needed to have that huge impact on your life, then I want to invite you into our Rental Academy community, where you're going to be linked up with investors all across the country. You're going to have coaching multiple times a week from myself and our entire panel of world-class coaches. You're going to be given all the knowledge and know-how that you need to be successful in real estate, the calculators, the templates, the guides, the lending partners, the insurance partners, the LLC partners, all of it. We're going to teach you everything you need to know to be successful in real estate investing. And then we're going to be there with you along the journey, hold your hand and guide you so that you can have the opportunity to reach and achieve financial freedom like I and so many of our students and people across the country have. So when you're ready to say yes, text the word WIN, W-I-N, to 871-861-9264. Set up a time to chat with myself or somebody on our team so that we can go on this journey with you and help you achieve the life of your dreams. I'm a huge baseball guy, and when I correlated to baseball, if you only try to hit a grand slam every time, or a home run every time, you can't hit a grand slam every time, you got to have people on base. But if you're only trying to hit a home run every time, you're going to have a pretty bad average. But if you will just try to hit a single, you'll hit a bunch of singles, and all of a sudden you'll connect with one and you'll hit a double, and then you'll connect with another one and it'll be a home run. And you'll be like, oh, that property was great. Right. And so you can't just shoot for the stars every time. Mix in some singles. And the more deals you do that are just decent deals, like Connor's saying, you will eventually, people will start to know you. And I have locksmiths who call me now. Hey, I'm changing locks for this estate. They got to sell this property. You may want to call them. They'll give me their number. Contractors, like you're saying, wholesalers, realtors, and lead generation will show, but you got to get started. You can't try to crush it. So I want to jump into short-term rentals because you really are, a guru. You've been a contributor to my groups, here in the next couple months, be a contributor to the Rental Academy. I trust, Connor, all things short-term rental. That's why I'm looking to buy from him currently, from his agent side of the business. We can talk some specific deals, but I also want to talk some generalities, some broad things that really can help these listeners that want to get into the Airbnb space. So when I think of, and you can add anything to this, but when I think of kind of four main pillars that we're looking at, and this is pretty much for any real estate, we got to be able to choose a market. We got to be able to analyze properties in that market. We got to be able to fund the deal, and we got to know how to manage. And so if you would walk us through, just starting at choosing that market and then to analyzing funding and then managing, the most efficient ways that you've set up in your business and you've seen your clients do it.
Yeah. So let's start with choosing a market. I think there's a few ways you can go with short-term rentals. The space that I generally live in is traditional vacation markets. There's all sorts of considerations with the market that you choose, but I know people that are crushing it in urban city markets. I've got clients that I'm working with in the city of Atlanta, working on some really cool projects. But traditionally, I think what people think of is that vacation market. And these are often markets that have had vacation rentals rolling for decades. And the local legislation is aligned with vacation rental owners. They're collecting tax revenue. That you're never going to see the legislation turn on these vacation rentals and say you can't do this anymore, because it's basically core to that local economy, right? So that's like an easy mental exercise to go through and say, hey, where did my family go on vacation growing up? Or where do I like to go on vacation? Or where am I seeing growth in an area? And what is that like quick hour vacation destination? If I'm seeing tons of population migration to the city of Austin or the city of Atlanta or Nashville, what are those vacation spots that I can find opportunity? And it's probably going to be a lake or a mountain town or some sort of national or state park. Those are going to be good opportunities. And generally what I found is the cash flow and the cash on cash return is harder to find out west.
Mm.
And the Southeast, the Midwest, even the Northeast, there's more, generally speaking, opportunity to find cash on cash return and cash flow. So that's picking a market. You want to find a market. And then within that market, though, you have to kind of identify the submarket and say, well, is there 1,000 4-bedroom places and then there's only 15 2-bedroom places? You got to find that like bedroom and amenity combination within that market that you think you have the best chance of winning. So
how do you find that? Like, what do you do to look at that?
Yeah, to share like some tactics there, from as far as identifying markets, I think most people have some familiarity. You can go research and look on Google and just find lists of top markets, and then maybe you want to avoid the ones that have been on all the articles over the last year or two. But maybe that'll kind of get your brain working, and you can look for secondary markets or like markets and other places that people aren't talking to. I'm all about like, finding the opportunity that not everyone else has found yet. So an example of that in North Georgia would be to drop a little gem here is like Dahlonega versus Blue Ridge and Ellijay, right? Like you've seen Blue Ridge on all the articles for the last couple of years. Not to say you can't invest in Blue Ridge, it's just a lot harder to succeed. Whereas like Dahlonega, no one's talking about Dahlonega, and the average performance for the next batch of investors is probably going to be better because it's an underserved opportunity.
They're getting
right.
in.
And then as far as like identifying specific like bed bath counts or amenities or things like that, there's all sorts of great data tools. AirDNA Rentalizer, STR Insights is another one. And even more specifically, like get on the phone and call the county and ask them, like I did this like last month on behalf of myself and my clients. I got on the phone, I talked to Lumpkin County and I say, can you give me the total count of short-term rentals and what was that number a year ago versus this year? And can you break that down between bedroom counts and get all that information? That's gold.
One
right?
phone call.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That is awesome.
What was the next part of the question? So it was market.
Yeah, and then analyze it. So we've chosen our market. Now, how do we know, okay, what are the returns going to be? What returns are we looking for ideally? I know we're not going to set strict parameters. And how do you find those?
Yeah, so often what I find is when I'm talking to inexperienced short-term rental investors, they ask me, well, what's the occupancy? And I think that's kind of I still don't understand why people ask me that. I should probably figure that out.
All about the money, baby.
All about the money. You got to look at the gross revenue, the gross annual revenue. So I always talk in terms of gross revenue to purchase price. Like that's the ratio. And when you're looking at analyzing deals, you want to look at a fraction of the top of the fraction being the gross revenue potential over the purchase price and try to find properties that are hitting at least 15 to 20% gross ROI. And you have to always talk in ranges because stuff can vary so much market to market, insurance costs, property tax costs, your utility, even property to property, like how old is the property and how much do you need to set aside for repairs? So you kind of have to talk in ranges. But if you're finding properties and how you actually analyze and maybe find that number is you know the purchase price, you find something interesting on Zillow, you go on AirDNA Rentalizer, there's a free tool. You plug in the address, you plug in the bed bath count, and then it spits out an annual gross revenue number. And any thoughtful investor wouldn't just take that number and run with it and make an offer. You're going to go a layer deeper, but you use that as kind of like the 1% rule. And I'm sure you've talked about the 1% rule on social media and on the podcast.
Give a quick breakdown. What is that real quick in case anybody doesn't know?
So the 1% rule is a quick kind of rule of thumb for analyzing a long-term rental where you're trying to find property that's going to rent, that 1 month's rent is equal to 1% of the purchase price, right? And if you find that, you probably got a good deal worth digging into. So this 15% minimum gross ROI threshold is kind of similar. It's a quick rule of thumb to find a good deal worth digging into further. But then you got to go a layer deeper and you got to run it by maybe your agent. You're going to run it by your property manager. You're going to get on Airbnb and actually look at competitive properties, look at their calendars, their nightly rates. And the process of analyzing a short-term rental is much more artistic than analyzing a long-term rental because there's so much out of your control as the investor. and there's so much that can change depending on demand dynamics and how you manage, how you design, how you set up the property, how you price the property. And so you take that gross ROI number, and then you start to run kind of a scenario analysis, with, your expenses are going to be somewhat easy to figure out and hone in. It's the revenue number that can swing pretty wildly. And so you have to kind of run the scenario analysis and say, okay, what's my worst case scenario? What's my break even scenario? What's a middle case scenario? What's a best case scenario? And then, like you and I have been talking about, have some foresight and some patience that, like, hey, long term, zoom out 5-10 years and say, okay, this is year one, but what about year 2, 5, 10? How am I going to feel about this property as I look to the future, right? So that's the analysis piece.
That's great. And I'll say, this is a plug for Connor. I don't know if you want any more clients, but we're about to send them your way. You can give them, we'll put the email in the show notes. But one of the things with working with Connor, I personally am working with him as we speak. He sent me, I don't know, 3 properties in the last 2 weeks. He does all this for you, which is fantastic. We all need to know how to do it. I think it's good for investors to know how to do it. But when you're working with a good agent who knows the game, they put these things together for you. And so he'll send me pro formas over, just that's a fancy word for a breakdown of what the, underwriting and analyzing is. And he'll show me, okay, worst case scenario, medium, how it probably is going to do, and then best case scenario. And it makes it very easy, to make a decision based off that. And then you can look and say, okay, this is year one returns, maybe not look as good because we got to put $20,000 of capital in it to get it ready to go. But what do these returns look like, over the next 5, 6, 7 years? And, and it's amazing. What are you looking for, when you're accumulating numbers? I normally, I imagine it's close to long-term rentals. You're going to look for taxes, insurance, maintenance, capital expenditures. You're going to have to look for utilities with an Airbnb, cleaning, vacancies. What else am I missing? Is that pretty much
like supplies, right?
Supplies,
so
yeah.
toilet paper, all that stuff, disposable.
Yep.
You're going to account for just, I think a line item that doesn't get talked about is kind of like, just like crap happens fund, right? like we had power outages this weekend, and so one of the most important parts of short-term rental investing is protecting the reviews, right? Like that's the name of the game. And so I'm always, proactively throwing a Venmo at people. If there's an issue with the stay, even if it's not my fault, it's the guest's fault. I'm throwing a Venmo at that guest and saying, hey, let me cover breakfast, and kind of just keeping those reviews coming along. So the crap happens fund.
I think that's genius, because there's so much stuff that happens with an Airbnb that you just aren't planning on. And with any property, and it's good to have, whether you factor that in on a separate line item or whether you bump your maintenance, up a little bit. It's definitely good, good to factor those things in as you're going. I know I have a guide, and I don't care if somebody has mine, Connor, if you have one. I know Travis Zappia has one. He's the young retiree by 33, where I break down what people need to furnish their Airbnb with, because I know that's a big thing. And, if you want to talk on that for a minute, kind of what to furnish, and then maybe more importantly, hit on design, because I know you actually just got back from a conference where that was a big conversation. And what you guys who haven't been in the Airbnb space will learn as you start doing some digging is it's more competitive than it was when I first got in 2019. There wasn't as many people doing it. Well, now there's more competition, which is fine. You don't have to be scared, but now you got to put your best foot forward.
Yeah, absolutely. One quick plug for like another line item in the pro forma is the platform fees. So Airbnb takes a 3% platform fee. So that's another thing to just kind of bake into your pro forma. And the last thing I'll say on the AirDNA Rentalizer tool is that you want to kind of from the start adjust that down a little bit, because it's probably baking in the cleaning fee revenue, which is a gray area for folks. But switching over to the furnishing conversation. So yeah, good call out on the conference. I went to STR Wealth Conference, put on by Bill Faith and Mike Sjogren, two great kind of voices in the short-term rental industry. And it was a really high level conference with some of the best short-term rental operators in the country, probably some of the best in the world. And one of the big themes and takeaways was that professional design has become increasingly important as the market for being an Airbnb investor, short term rental investor, has matured. If you think about any kind of asset class or business opportunity, you have to kind of think about it in terms of an adoption curve, or that life cycle of, are you an early adopter, an early majority, late majority, or a laggard? And where are you on that adoption curve? And different people have different ideas of where we are on that curve. I still think we're relatively early, but as we move further along the curve, you have to think that there's more competition and you have to be more professional as you start to invest. And so one of the big kind of opportunity areas is for people that can come in and really professionally design and furnish and amenity a property to stand out in a crowd of really average properties. And so we're hearing lots of articles about an Airbnb bust or this oversaturation in the market. And the reality is that it's just a maturing industry, and there's still tons of opportunity for good operators and good designers. You don't even have to be a great business operator. If you're like an amazing designer and you slap some great design on a pretty well purchased property, you're going to do great because we're in this world where the booking happens based off of those first few pictures, and does it scream Instagram or Pinterest worthy vacation? And if you can do that, you can win. And there's real ROI attached to professional design and furnishing. So that's been kind of a light bulb aha moment for me the last few weeks. That's not something I've traditionally like really emphasized with myself or my clients, but something I'm going to lean into more. And I think if you're entering the STR market as a new investor in 2023, you have to be ready to like come in and operate like a pro and really take it seriously. And if you do, there's still plenty of opportunity. So don't get scared away from it, but you have to take it seriously.
That's a good point. Cream rises to the top, baby. You be the best and you'll be okay. I mean, look at hotels. How oversaturated are they? I mean, a lot of them are still in business and the good ones are still thriving.
Yes, sir.
So just buy, stock it up, make it look pretty, operate it good, and you'll be good to go. Funding wise, how do you fund these deals? What are all the ways you've seen it funding, but what are kind of some of the key main ones?
Yeah. So one that has commonly been used over the last few years, and it's gotten harder, is 10% down second home loans. And I'm going to throw a big like caveat asterisk that you got to do your due diligence and make sure that you aren't committing mortgage fraud when you go get that product. But I've seen it done. I've seen lots of people do it. It's been a very common way to get a vacation home, rent it out on Airbnb. You just want to make sure you do that the right way, and with a loan officer or a lender that understands how to help you navigate that process. So that's huge. That's why a lot of people have switched from long-term rentals where they're throwing 20-25% down over to this 10% down.
Well, you can buy like a super nice vacation rental that's going to cash flow you more for essentially the same amount down as you would spend for a janky like C-class long-term rental. Now I burr method a lot of my long-term rentals, so I'm getting into them without putting money down. But traditionally, you're going to put 20% down for a long-term rental, whereas Airbnb you can put 10% down. So by the time you factor in the cash input of your cash on cash return, you're going to come out ahead a lot of times on those long-term rentals or short-term rentals, although the property's significantly more expensive often.
Absolutely. So obviously you have, your 20-25% down options as well. A common strategy has been DSCR loans. DSCR has gotten a ton of hype lately. And one or two of the lenders that I work closely with have some frustration with DSCR because they're like, DSCR kind of sucks. And actually, it's bank statement loans is a way to go for a lot of people. So just want to throw that out there. Like I'm exploring DSCR versus bank statement loans and finding that bank statement loans are actually a better way to do. You're still probably doing 15% down minimum, but you're probably getting better pricing in terms than DSCR. But DSCR again is another product that if you can't qualify for traditional financing, you can use. DSCR stands for debt service coverage ratio. So you can use the projected rent or rent potential on the loan to qualify for the property. So those two are common strategies. And then the other things that I think like newbies should be thinking about is how do I maybe house hack or owner occupier property for as little as 0.35% down. And maybe I'm Airbnb out the back unit or the basement or the bedrooms, or building an ADU on the property, or putting in a tiny home. Lots of ways. And I think you do have to be scrappier these days to get started. But those are real options for people in certain markets.
Yeah, that's getting scrappy, and it works. I was talking to a couple this morning who are still house hacking. They're married, Connor. Married. They're great folks. They're married, and they have 6 roommates that house hack. And so they bring in $4,500 a month in rent from their house hacking. Their mortgage and expenses are $4,000. So they're cash flowing $500 off their personal residence. I mean, and they didn't have to put hardly any money down to buy that property. So what a fantastic,
so much respect for someone that's willing to do that. I'm not, but
no, at this point, being married with 4 kids, let me tell you, who's the only person who's come to stay in my house is like an au pair or a nanny. If anybody listening to this wants to come be our full-time nanny, you're more than welcome. We'll find you a spot. But anybody just trying to rent, not adding any value other than, I don't need your monetary value at this point. I need help with the kids. Like, oh gosh. Yeah. So lastly, and we'll wrap this up, but I think this is probably the most important. I wish we had a little more time. We may have to go long here, because managing these properties, this is where you got to buy good, right? And then where you make sure that you meet those metrics that you came up with when you're analyzing is through the managing. And I'll lay this out and then I'll let you take over. The whole goal for Airbnb is to get 5-star reviews and be a super host. If you get a 4-star review on Airbnb, it's like a 1-star. Okay. So those of y'all who don't know the Airbnb game, you get a 4-star, it's terrible. Airbnb hammers you. And so your whole future business is banked off of you treating these customers, these tenants, good, presenting a product that looks like it does in pictures, and being on top of your game. So what have you put in place to make sure, hey, when these people come in, they're getting the best experience possible?
Yeah. So I wish I had the data on this, but I heard on a podcast recently, I was surprised because I run in circles of Airbnb investors. And so I think it's really common, but it turns out that the amount of superhosts is a relatively small percentage of total hosts on the platform. And the amount of revenue that superhosts get is disproportionately higher than the average host, something to the tune of like 20 to 30% higher revenue or something like that. I wish I had the stat. And I self-manage my coming up on 5 short-term rentals. And I've been fortunate that I've actually only had 1 4-star review out of a few hundred reviews, a couple hundred reviews.
Wow.
And I think some of that is luck, but I think there are certain strategies that you put in place. One of the obvious ones is just like under promise, over deliver, right? So you're setting expectations and then you're outperforming those expectations with surprise gifts or surprise amenities. You're going in and you're improving the property consistently, and there's nicer things there at the property than what they saw in the pictures. They're getting toiletries when they were told to bring their own. They're getting firewood when they were told to bring their own. You're setting expectations low and then you're outperforming. And then as far as protecting those 5-star reviews, you're asking your guests for those 5-star reviews. Like You're like, hey, checkout message. And there's so many things you do along the way. You're checking in on them mid-stay and saying, hey, no need to respond, but if there's anything going wrong with the property, you need to tell me. Is everything okay? Are you having a good stay?
How do you set up that automation? I know we go, right when they book, a couple days before check-in, middle of the stay, when they leave, asking for.
You got it.
Is that kind of what you do?
You got it. Yep. Same process.
You can automate all that, everybody. You can automate all that. I do it through the Airbnb app. I know some people use like Hospitable and other apps. You can.
I use Guesty.
Okay. Yep.
Guesty. And it's super, super easy. You can automate the messaging. You can automate notifications to your cleaners. And man, I've had crappy stuff happen. Just this past weekend, my guest showed up and my cleaner did not show up to clean. And so it was dirty. And
it's the worst.
So I sent the cleaner out. I told the guests, like, go get dinner, Venmo'd them. And they were great, super nice guests. And I found that if I'm the first one to like offer before they have to ask me or try to extort me for a refund or something, if I throw I've often believed that I've saved myself hundreds of dollars by throwing $30 at the guests, right?
Yes.
It's
Thousands
easy.
of dollars.
Yeah, yeah. So management, you can self manage. You can hire a co-host, a manager. You can hire a management company. You're just going to give up that margin if you go pass that off to a management company. And there's great software and tools and templates to be able to do it yourself. So I definitely encourage people to do that. And that's, I think, one of the core parts of my service as a realtor is that I'm helping other people do that. I'm holding their hand through the setup and the management process. I'm available for a phone call 6 months down the road. And I've had these moments where a client checks in with me and they're like, "Hey, I'm not doing well. Like what?" And I'm looking at their listing with them. I'm asking them questions and like turning their business around and taking them from, like coming out of pocket on their property to cash flowing.
Mm.
I love that. Like that's just good business, but it's also just like fun to like see people make a bunch of money because I'm helping them too. So it's totally doable. Like we talked about, you can be an average person and do really well at this.
Just do the right thing. Go the extra mile. I've been in sales my entire career. And one of the best ways to win somebody over is when something bad happens and you're the hero. So, you're going to freak out and feel terrible when the place isn't cleaned. You pretty much had no control over that unless you just forgot to tell the cleaning people, but you should have calendar sync as 2023. So like Connor said, if you hop on that, hey, just learned it. The place isn't cleaned. I am so sorry. That's totally on us. You guys go get you something to eat. It's on me. Venmo them immediately. Most people are going to understand, and that's going to make them more inclined to give you a review. You're probably going to have a better chance for somebody to take the time and leave you a 5-star review when something bad happens and you take care of it than somebody just having a standard stay. Because I'm trying to be better at leaving reviews because I'm a host, but I still sometimes just like, and so it really gives you that opportunity to go in and win people over, and just whatever it is, go the extra mile. Like those reviews are worth spending a few $100 to get, especially early on when you're building that repertoire up, because one bad review pulls you down a lot quicker than one good review pulls you out. I've had to pay for people's hotel before. Somebody got there at like 11 p.m. The place wasn't clean. You talk about a bad wake up call. I fell asleep in my recliner watching some baseball game. And my phone starts going off. I'm like, what in the world? And this tenant had showed up. Yes, and they were livid. And I just, sorry. Don't ever fight back. Just try to depress the situation. Here's a little tip. Something we learned at Centos, ECIR. When you're trying to calm a situation down, ECIR, ECIR. Empathize, clarify, isolate, and then respond. Hey, I'm so sorry that this happened. I just want to clarify the place isn't clean. All right. Is this the only issue? Isolate. Is this the only issue that you guys have run into at the property? Yeah, this is it. Yeah, we're so. But look, I would be furious if I was you guys. You've been on the road all day. I am so sorry. I'm going to put you up at this nice hotel and I'm going to cover your meal for the next day and give you the night, a night discount, whatever you decide to do. And if you jump on it like that, you're going to have the opportunity for a lot better reviews than if you just pretend it doesn't happen, because it definitely happened. And so you better jump on it. Real quick, Connor, what tech do you use? What's some of your apps and software that you use to help you?
Yeah, I'll run that out. In fact, my most recent post on Instagram outlines my whole tech stack. So that's my plug for my Instagram,
which is at Cushman Homes.
At Cushman Homes. I'll highlight some of that. And real quick, just as a follow-up on that story, put yourself in a position to do good business like that. And I think you're not in a position to do that if you're scraping together every penny you have and you can barely get enough to like get the property live. You can't even afford like a nice couch and you're, do what you got to do. I'm all for like being scrappy to pull that first deal together. But put yourself as often as you can in a position financially to be able to do good business. Part of the reason why I believe my real estate agent business has been so successful is that I've never acted out of desperation for commission. I've never had that like commission breath because I had my W-2 that was cranking in the background. And so I could be choosy. I didn't work with people that I didn't feel like were aligned with my values. And I never had to act out of desperation. And I didn't leave my W-2 until I was going to continue to be in that position based on my rental portfolio and where my agent business was. Same thing goes for the rental properties. Like always have the reserves, the cash flow, and the portfolio in place to be able to operate and be a good business person, be a good person. And that's going to help you actually accelerate and grow your business long term. So sometimes you got to like slow it down to speed it up and do well and grow. Quick highlights on the tech stack. I think the kind of the most important pieces are that property management software, if you're going to scale a portfolio beyond one property. So I use Guesty for Host for that. Pricing software, Smart Price Labs is what I use for dynamic pricing. And people will ask me like, what's your nightly rate? I'm like, I have no idea. Like on a Tuesday in March, it's $110, but on a Saturday in December, it's $650.
Yep.
And there's no reason you shouldn't be operating your pricing like that. Not
Price
to
Labs does it
mention,
all for you.
yeah. And it's not just the price, but it's also the minimum stay requirements, right? So like, I don't want a one night stay on a Saturday and lose that Friday booking because no one wants to book just the Friday. But I will take a one night booking on a Tuesday that's empty this week, right? So these custom minimum night rules and restrictions on the calendar are total game changers for profitability on your rentals. So those are the big two. If I could maybe plug one more, it would be tech banking. I use Relay for banking and Stessa for accounting. So just having good banking and accounting systems to set yourself up long term for growth, I think is important.
I love it. This has been action packed, dude. Full of nuggets that is going to help a lot of people who are ready to start diving into the real estate space. So Connor, man, thank you so much for being on. Guys and gals listening to this right now, if you'll take the time, send this to one or two friends who have been wanting to get into real estate, wanting to learn short-term rentals, but for whatever reason they've been held back. They're not sure what steps to take. Share it with them. I think this episode will definitely help. And then take a screenshot of you listening to this or watching this on YouTube, podcast, wherever you're getting this episode at, and tag myself at Finance Cowboy and Connor at Cushman Homes on Instagram. We both love to thank you personally for taking time out of your day to meet with us. Connor, lastly, where can they get a hold of you? Obviously, Instagram at Cushman Homes. If somebody's interested in working with you to acquire Airbnb, what's the best place to get in touch with you?
Yeah, DM me on Instagram. I'm also getting more active on LinkedIn. So Connor Cushman on LinkedIn, you should be able to find me. Instagram message and reference the podcast, and that'll help me kind of prioritize that message and know what we're talking about. And I'm happy to help.
Awesome. Well, Connor, appreciate it, dude. This was a great episode, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jaron. Appreciate the time, man.